So good evening, everyone. Thank you for those who've registered and signed up for our webinar. My name is Greg Kanaan, and I am the chair of the RISD Lawyers Alumni Affinity Group. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we are a group made up of RISD alums who pursued a career in the law. This event is being recorded, so for those of you who weren't able to watch it live, that's okay. You'll be able to watch it later. I'm joined with Michelle Mechanic. She's a friend of mine and also a fellow RISD attorney. And today's, this evening's webinar, I don't really consider it so much a webinar. I think of it as more of an informal conversation. We're going to be talking about law school. Over the years, I've had a number of RISD students and recent alums not only ask me about my career in the law, but just ask for logistical advice on what law school is like and how to apply. And so even though today's conversation will touch on our actual law careers, I want to keep it mostly focused on the law school part of it, because I think that is, for those of you who are interested, the most immediate part of that puzzle. But also, I think it's a big part of, at least for me, I don't want to speak for Michelle, but a big part of what I was thinking about before I applied, and then, of course, during law school. So I'm just going to give a brief intro to myself, and then I'll let Michelle talk about her background. Again, my name is Greg Kanaan. I graduated from RISD in 2002 from the FAV department. I spent 7 years as a film producer, mostly working on documentary television. I did a number of things for Court TV and Discovery Channel and different networks like that. And for reasons we will go into tonight, I made the switch to law school, to the law, and I've been practicing now for 8 years. I have two jobs. By day, I work for the federal government. I work for the Department of Housing and Urban Development in their compliance department. I do civil rights compliance. And at night, I actually have my own law practice where I represent clients who are creative professionals like yourselves. So I represent artists, designers, filmmakers, and people of that nature. So Michelle, do you want to give people a little background into yourself?
Sure, I'll try to keep it brief. I'm Michelle Mechanic, and I also graduated from RISD in 2002. However, I graduated from the glass department. So if there are any glass folks out there, hi. And I would say I never really made the switch to law and so much transition, because I still do consider myself an artist and I still do make art. So I was working as a production glassblower and as a visual artist, and I took a nonprofit position and realized I really liked having an impact on people directly, which then drove me towards the law. So from there, I attended Rutgers Law School, and I graduated in 2007. And I am admitted in New York and New Jersey. However, I live in Connecticut. And I started out as an assistant district attorney in Bronx County. And from there, I began my own criminal and victim advocacy practice. And I had that for, I want to say, 7 or 8 years. And then after that, I made a move to Connecticut, had a second child, was sick of commuting. So I actually transitioned, and now I work as a political policy advisor, where I do policy advising and legal research for Democratic candidates for office, mostly statewide office. And I also do still make artwork, and I've made a body of work that was very much inspired by my experience as an assistant district attorney in the Bronx. And here I am now. So.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, Michelle and I live 4 towns apart, so we can done this in the same room. Before we actually get started, a couple of housekeeping things. We've had a question in the Q&A section. Did we disable the view options? Yes, this is technically a webinar, so you won't be able to see the other people who are attending. But if you do have questions, you can ask a question in the Q&A box, and we will answer it. This event is being recorded, so that people, if people want to view it later, they can do that. So, there are about 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 people who graduated from RISD and went on to legal careers. There's about 15 to 20 people who are active in the RISD Affinity Lawyers Group. But I wanted to do this conversation with Michelle, because Michelle and I have known each other for a bunch of years, but I don't think we've ever had this conversation. So that's, I thought it would be interesting to talk with her about this. That said, if you have questions, we're going to touch on a number of different topics. But if you have questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A. We will try to get to them as quickly as possible. We have about an hour, so we'll try to get through things. So Michelle, I'm going to ask you to sort of kick us off and talk about your transition, as you put it, from your career as an artist into a career as an attorney.
Okay, so it was half reactionary and half organic. So I'll explain that, especially if there are women watching. You'll understand this one. So part of it is, as we all know, having attended RISD, everyone knows you're a good artist. You know you're a good artist. Your family knows you're a good artist. Everyone at this high school you went to knew you're a good artist, and everyone sort of expected, oh, you're good at this, and this is what you're going to go do and be. So in that way, it was very like sort of, oh, Michelle's a good visual artist, then she's going to go to RISD and be an artist, and that's what I expected, and I didn't really consider that much of anything else. And then two different things happened. One was the idea of impact. So I graduated from RISD, and I was very curious when I was at RISD. I was like, oh, I want to take this class at Brown, and I want to do this interdisciplinary thing. And then, so the first thing that happened was my husband was at MIT at the time. He was my boyfriend, but I had known him since high school. And people kept going, you're so lucky to have such a smart boyfriend. And then they would say, oh, Jesse, what's your next step? Law school? And no one would ever say that to me. It was always asked of Jesse, oh, what's his next step? And I'm so lucky to have him. And I was like, how do you know? Maybe I like law. Like maybe I'm interested in that. And the other thing that troubled me was sort of this removal between art making and impact. So you have art making, you have viewership. From that viewership, you have discussion. And then from that discussion, hopefully you have impact. So when I had an opportunity, I was working as a production glassblower and I was slinging coffee. And I had an opportunity to work for a nonprofit for underserved kids as an SAT tutor, because I was at MIT where they had all math, but nobody to teach verbal. So I really liked having an impact on these young people. And I thought to myself, so I forget what happened, but finally there was that last and final, so Jesse, what's your next step? Is it law school? And I was like, forget it. So I got a job as a paralegal to decide, do I actually enjoy this? And when I realized that I did, I took my LSATs and applied to law school and absolutely loved it. And it's all over from there. How about you?
Yeah, well, for me, it was, I can't deny there was a little bit of, how do I put it? Being like a revolutionary kind of thing, so much of my identity through middle school and high school, and obviously my time at RISD, was being an artist. And I didn't see myself, I couldn't separate me from being an artist. And obviously now I know as an adult, I never had to do that to begin with. But at the time it was so much a part of me that as my career in television wound down, it felt like, what is the furthest thing I could do from what I'm doing now? And law it just seemed like, that fit the bill, but it was more than that. I mean, I'm being facetious a little bit. The reality was that I spent a great deal of time thinking about making that change. There wasn't one event. And I've certainly had events where if I tell the story, I can say this was the moment where I had the epiphany that said, I'm going to go to law school and become a lawyer and fight for people's rights. But I've had those events, but they never resulted in that happening. It was a period of time. It was a slow burn over a number of years. There was a point where I must have asked my wife, who was then my girlfriend, what do you think? What do you think if I went to law school? And it was always kind of a joke. And then the more I said it, the less of a joke it seemed like. And I do want to add that I'd worked for 3 years for a producer who himself was an attorney. He called himself a recovering attorney. So he was an attorney who became a filmmaker, and his production partner was also an attorney who was a production counsel. And working with them day in, day out and seeing how they solved problems was very appealing to me. I know that it wasn't that they knew the answer to everything, but they seemed to know how to find the answer to everything. And that is something that I found extremely appealing and still do to this day.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I omitted something really important, which is that, so I never looked at the law as being extremely different or alien. My mom's a lawyer. I mean, my mom's an artist and my father's a lawyer. So I was raised by a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. So I was always interested in it and it was always part of my life. So just to slip that in there, for me, it didn't seem like a completely different animal as much as sort of another interest.
Yeah. So what was the thing? Were you afraid of law school? I mean, because law school is in and of itself kind of like it's it's a system. It's an ecosystem in and of itself. And coming from RISD, I don't want to speak for you, but even though they're academics at RISD, they're academic courses at RISD, I did not feel prepared for the sheer amount of academic work that was required of me. And I knew that going into law school, that would be the case, that I'd have to do a lot of reading and writing and research. And I'm wondering if that had something to do with, if that affected you at all.
I wasn't really affected by that. I worked as a paralegal beforehand, so I was doing a lot of legal research and writing. One of the things that my dad said, and I believe and agree with, law school is trade school. It really is. You go there and you learn how to be a thing. You have a very strict set of things that you need, like a very small skill set that you need to acquire in order to be successful at law school, which is totally different from being successful at lawyering, by the by. Right. But I felt like it was pretty organic because critical thinking as an artist is so incredibly important. And also the idea of honing your skill at a particular thing. So the voluminous reading, I was maybe I'm just full of garbage, but I went into it just sort of like, I can do this. Like, I can read your stuff and tell you what the rule is. A lot of it really was, it's a lot scarier than it seems. And I think that the one thing that I did do that might have helped a little bit, and RISD and Brown truly do this in a much more comprehensive way now, but at the time I could cross-register for academic courses at Brown. And I chose to do that for a number of courses. So that got me used to having to read 80 pages a night and do a lab and then show up to my RISD class, which maybe made it a little bit easier. But in all sincerity, I think it takes a lot more critical thinking and thoughtfulness to be an artist than it does to be a lawyer. I do. I think that good lawyers are extremely critical thinkers, but I think most lawyers, you learn the rule and you repeat what the rule is, and it's pretty easy. So it's just, what kind of lawyer do you want to be a good one? I think being an artist is a good start, actually.
I really like your point about law school being a trade school. I mean, that's something that when I was doing, once I had decided this was at the very least a potential option for a career change, I did a lot of research. I talked to family friends who were attorneys, or friends who were in law school, or people who had gone through that process. I talked to a friend who was a paralegal who was applying to law school. And I tried to do as much research for myself as possible, because I said, if I'm going to sink 3 years and $100,000 into it, this is not something to take lightly. And I did know, and I still do know, plenty of people who went to law school kind of on a whim, like, oh, I'll try it, and they did it.
Yeah.
And some people who said, well, my dad said I had to go, so I'm going to do it. But that's not the case. That's not what I was dealing with. And so I felt like, if I'm going to make this change, I'm going to do it and do it once, and not like, I don't want to like fall into it, find out I hate it, and then make another switch, but now with some $100,000 worth of law school loans to pay off. I didn't want to do that. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. And I think that's what made the difference for me, in making it less intimidating, you know. So I spent, yeah.
Did you enjoy law school more? Do you think then that people who were sort of expected to do it as their next step?
I think there was a lot of people who I knew, who I was friends with, who did it because they saw it as a means to an end. They said, well, I don't necessarily care about law school or this process. I just want to be a lawyer, or I want to work in the White House, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And for me, it was very much, I mean, I did want to be a lawyer, and I am a lawyer, and I love being a lawyer, but I said, I can't do this if it's going to be 3 years of misery, because it doesn't, you know, if I think, like a lot of things, law school is what you make of it, and I don't think it gets better, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's not like, I don't know that, at least in my experience and with my friends, it's like law school was like a precursor of things to come, rather than.
I thought it was very different than the actual practice. Yeah, I did.
Well, I don't want to say that law school is like being a lawyer, because it's not. What I mean to say is that if law school is a slog, being a lawyer is probably also going to be a slog. I mean, in a different way. And I do know people who hated law school and loved their lives, and I do know people who love law school and hate their law practices. But I think, by and large, the people that I know, the people who like law school like being a lawyer, and the people who don't like law school don't like being a lawyer.
That I would agree with. And just, I want to rewind to something that you had said about talking to a lot of people. If there are any women who are watching this, I want to say that I had a very interesting experience talking to people about the fact that I was going to law school. I got a lot of negative feedback from men. I was told that I was going to get rejected from law schools by men who were in law school or were attorneys, that I wasn't going to get into my target schools. So if you want to speak to people and really get feedback, I'm sorry to say this, Greg, bounce your ideas off of women, because I had a lot of negative and a lot of misogynistic feedback that if I had not just sort of said, this is ridiculous, I might have listened, and they were completely wrong. So, you know, I was told, it's not for you. You're not going to like it. You're not going to get in. You should apply to your safety school. Your safety school is your target school. None of it is true. Other people are also going to tell you, and this goes for both women and men, well, in order to be a successful lawyer, you really have to study political science or history as an undergraduate. And that's complete bullshit. Pardon my language. No, it's not true. Like, you can literally study ice skating and be a lawyer. It's the one field that you literally have, you need absolutely, there's no prerequisite whatsoever. Like, you can be an acrobat and be a lawyer, or you can be a poli-sci major and go be a lawyer.
Did you speak to women?
I didn't speak to women as much, because a lot of the women I was surrounded by were going into like either the arts or STEM. But when I was working as a paralegal, I spoke with female lawyers and found them very inspiring, and I felt empowered. But when I was thinking about my application process, I spoke to a lot of young men, like men who are maybe, you know, 5-7 years older than I was. And even as a paralegal, there was a lot of sort of negative feedback or more pushback, like, oh, well, do you read the Wall Street Journal every morning? Because if you don't read the Wall Street Journal, and it was like, that's just not true at all.
You know, that's interesting. I think in general, that's good advice, to talk to people like yourself. Who, because I mean, I did talk to a lot of men, white men, and I got very similar answers, but I think maybe it's my art training, or maybe it's something else, but I have a pretty good bullshit detector, and I was able to know when I thought especially when you're talking to people who've been part of the profession for a long time, You know, we have a family friend. He's been an attorney for 40 years. At a certain point, his advice about applying to law school, which he did 40 years ago, is not all that relevant. And what I'm trying to get out of him is something slightly different than someone who just came through law school. But I guess I kind of want to throw the question back to you that you initially asked me, which is, did you enjoy law school?
I absolutely loved it. I really loved it. And, you know, one thing I want to explain, if you really do want to see if law school is a viable option, it is important to take practice LSAT tests and see how you're scoring. And I would recommend taking an LSAT class. Your ability to get a high LSAT score really has nothing to do with how well you will do in law school or how much you will enjoy it, but it will give a good idea of how feasible it will be for you to get into law school. And then passing the bar is a separate conversation. But I loved law school. I was actually very vocal. I wasn't like the quiet one in the back. I felt like I belonged once I was there. And I had the benefit of having another glassblower in my class at Rutgers Law, as well as the former guitarist of a hardcore punk band. So it was nice because I said, okay, there are other people like me here. It's not, you know, everybody didn't really study political science or US history. There were plenty of creative, interesting folks.
I agree. When I went to Northeastern Law School in Boston, and when I finally committed and made that choice and I said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be a former filmmaker who is now a law student. I remember very clearly going to the first day of law school. It's not classes. It's just like a big orientation. You're all in an auditorium, and they trot out the professors. Then they all do their little spiel about what the world is going to be like.
And some kid wears a suit. There's always a kid who shows up in a suit.
And the dean at the time, she got up and she said, you all come from a variety of different backgrounds, and some of you are this and some of you are this. And she said, 3 of you are filmmakers. I'm like, I guess I'm not that special after all.
No, it's true. Somebody was like, the girl over there is a glassblower. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what are the odds of that? I know. However, you know, that is the first thing a lot of people want to talk about when they see my resumes. They're like, so how did a glassblower become a lawyer? And I was like, I decided to. You know, it's really not that complicated. Again, I really enjoyed law school. I enjoyed the problem solving, and I also enjoyed the structure of it because as an artist, there's really as a designer, perhaps more so, but as a visual artist, there aren't that many parameters around how far you can go with what you're doing. There's a lot of rule breaking. It's not as sort of restrictive, whereas there's a framework to the law that you kind of have to stay within. And if you get out of that framework, you kind of go willy-nilly. So I enjoy that kind of structure to the point where when I was at RISD, I used to drive in traffic because I felt like there was a lack of structure and I needed to submit to something. So, you know, that kind of framework is really good for an artist's brain because we've had to work without that framework for so long.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We actually
go ahead.
I was going to respond to that, but a question came through, which I think actually ties into a little bit of what we were talking about. Did you choose places to apply for based on professors, clinics, etc.? I'm interested in some specific civil rights topics, and I'm having trouble searching through the possible options. I kind of think there's 2 answers to this question, at least for me. One is that how do I want to say this in a delicate way? It kind of doesn't matter where you go to law school, I think. I don't know, Michelle, what do you think?
So I think it depends on how you look at it. I think there's 2 different things. I think, first of all, and this was within the context of civil rights, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So for civil rights, you want to think, do you want to be a practitioner or do you want to be more of an academic? So if you want to practice civil rights law, it is good to look at what schools are less theoretical and more about practice. The other thing to look at is there are law schools that are noteworthy for civil rights and activism. I mean, Rutgers is one of them. Another one that I would mention that not a lot of people talk about, which is really like very much like the social just CUNY, City University of New York's law school, is basically premised on civil rights and social justice. To the point where it's gotten like extremely competitive to get in there. But I would say if you're interested in that, go for it. But you can pursue social justice with any good sound legal education, in my opinion. It's just, there are some clinics like, I forget which school is now doing the Innocence Project, but I believe it started at Cardozo, but it went to Columbia at a certain point, I believe. Right. I might be wrong, but it started at Cardozo, and then I think it moved from there. I know that there's an immigration rights project that's out of NYU School of Law. So, you can look up the different projects and also look up the clinics, because the clinics are where you can actually make an impact as a law student. So,
I want to echo everything Michelle just said. I would also say that, Northeastern, by the way, is also is a school which has a very strong public interest focus, which is one of the reasons I went there. Northeastern is also known because it has a co-op program, and that was also very appealing to me because I knew that for me, I said, if I'm not going to Yale or Harvard Law, then I need to get some real world experience under my belt. I also know that I'm personally I'm a hands-on learner. I have a harder time learning law theoretically just by reading. I need to see it in action. And so that was very appealing to me. But, so I think, everything Michelle said is right. But I also want to stand by my initial statement, which is that to a large degree, it doesn't super matter where you go. I mean, if you're not going to Yale, Harvard, NYU, Columbia, or Stanford, it doesn't truly matter unless you really want to, like, if you want to work at a big law firm, that's not where you have to go, but that's where you're going to have your best options, because those degrees are gold. I mean, having a Yale law degree is currency. Having a Harvard law degree is currency. If you're not going to end up at one of those schools, then I think you have to think through very carefully what it is you want to do, and then start tailoring your research to law schools based on that. When I was going through that process of applying, I said I knew I wanted to do something that had a public interest focus, and I wasn't entirely sure what that was. I thought for a long time and I wanted to be a prosecutor, and I ended up going kind of the other way, but I'm still in public interest.
I did both.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I know that I tailored my law school search based on that assumption, that I was going to be working in public interest, that I was not going to do the big law firm thing. And so, I don't know that you can predict with any real accuracy that you're going to get a better career in civil rights because you went to Pepperdine versus UConn or something. I don't think you can do that math.
I'm going to actually bounce in here just about one thing, because it's a regret that I have, and it's a big regret. So I did not apply to any Ivies, and I just want to say that was a massive mistake. And I was later told that my LSAT scores were sufficient that I could have gotten into an Ivy. So first and foremost, civil rights and public interest law are becoming competitive fields where if you go look at someplace like the Bronx Defenders or the Legal Aid Society, their young guns are going to be coming from Ivy League schools too. There's a big trajectory toward big law. Greg's absolutely correct. But the one thing that I would say is don't be afraid to do it. I was afraid, and I didn't think that I would get in because I had an undergraduate degree in fine arts. And I actually think that it's the Ivies and some of the better schools that are able to recognize the uniqueness of a different kind of background. So I would say, for any of you thinking of applying to law school, take those practice LSAT LSAT tests. look at those scores and look at the scores for these schools and apply to the schools that seem appropriate and correlate to your scores. Because, you know, there are artists. I know of a girl who she had some sort of website called like the Punk Rock Lawyers page or something, and she went to Cooper Union, studied visual arts, and then went straight to Columbia Law School. So it's not unheard of. It's absolutely doable. But I also think sometimes it's not the name that's that important. It's the program, which is why I specifically mentioned CUNY. Like, it's not my alma mater, but I just happen to have, like, if there's a CLE in a civil rights topic, I'll go to the one at CUNY. I know it's going to be a good program.
And, and by the way, I think, barring some, really, law schools at the lower end of the list, I think you're probably going to get a great education no matter where you go. I mean, I went to Northeastern,
Agreed.
Which at the time had like, if you're looking at the U.S. News and World Report rankings, at the time it was like 70. Whatever, it doesn't. These rankings didn't mean anything to me because I knew I wanted to go to Northeastern and I got in, and so I went. But I remember very clearly the summer of my 2L year, my second year, not the summer, the winter of my 2L year. I did an internship with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, and I was there with a friend of mine. And a friend of mine from law school. We both were there together. And towards the end of our internship, a bunch of Harvard law students came, and we ran circles around them. They didn't know anything. I mean, I felt very, on one hand, I felt like it's not fair that they got into Harvard and I'm so much better than them. But at the same time, it made me feel really good that the education I was getting was really top notch, and it didn't matter that I wasn't at Harvard. So.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about the person and what you do with it. So I have one of my very closest friends went to Harvard Law School, and then I know some other people. And my very good friend who went to Harvard Law School is very, very bright and
yeah, I'm not
very capable. But then we have another friend, and my friend naturally presumed that anyone who went to Harvard Law School was going to be clever. And I was like, no, you don't understand. That woman's a blithering idiot. Like, I just had to look up like 3 cases for her. So again, it's sort of what you do with what you have. I went to Rutgers. I knew Rutgers was a good choice for me. I got in-state tuition. So a good state school is a good solid shot at not spending a lot of money for a quality law school education. I like that very much. It has a good reputation. It's an old law school, but I think it's really what you make of it and where you take it.
Yeah. Did I want to, because we're believe it or not, we're almost we're over halfway through.
It's because it's me and you, Greg. We're both talkers.
I wanted to get to this topic. I was curious, and you touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to delve into it a little bit deeply. Did RISD prepare you at all for law school? Because I know for me, I want to joke with this, but at first I thought nothing I did at RISD prepared me, and then I realized that the work, just like the brute force work that we do, really did prepare me.
Oh my God. So the RISD foundation year workload was so much heavier than any law school workload that I literally was like shopping online in my law school classes. Like, we would have, I don't know, like 300 pages of reading, and I'd be like, nothing. This is nothing as bad as making a thing out of paper that can hold a piano and have, like, what we did at RISD was hard, and it was time consuming, and it was a tremendous amount of problem solving, especially that foundation year. Like, thank you, Alba Corrado. I passed law school because of your 3D design class, because there is a demanding workload. It's diverse, and also it's a tremendous amount of problem solving. I mean, it's all problem solving except for within the terms of the law. There's a framework for how to solve that problem and what kind of problem you need to solve. But it was voluminous, and I believe it was RISD and MIT had the heaviest freshman workloads, and law school was like a blip. I did actually study for my exams though, and I did study for the bar very hard. I studied for my bar exams, and I encourage, like, anybody who's going to go to law school, like, even if you don't want to practice, take the bar. And you know, it is what it is, but that I did have to study for, and that was a lot of work. But again, there were tricks, like, okay, so to take a law school exam, this is the format with which I write out the answer to the exam. Like, you don't have those tricks as an artist. There's no format for how to be good at a good art student. So,
you know, I've actually thought about this quite a lot. And I remember, you know, if you're given an assignment at RISD, like, let's say you have to do 50 drawings. I remember there was the classic 50 drawing assignment.
Did you have Victor Lara, the 50?
No, I didn't. I had Aldo Credico freshman year.
Okay.
I mean, he still made you do 50 drawings, but it was just like, he'd like go stand in the shower and do 50 drawings in your shower kind of thing. It was very conceptual, which I loved, and was terrible at. But, you know, you can't show up to studio without 50 drawings because then you have to stand in front of everybody and say, well, I didn't do them. And that's,
I did 6 drawings. It's like everybody who had there was a 3D design teacher who I didn't have, but my roommate had. And he had said at the very beginning of the semester, you're going to have to make a chess set out of wax.
Yeah.
And you have to make at least one side of this chess set. And people went to that critique who weren't in the class to see what happened. And like, there were kids who showed up with like a fraction of a half a chess set. It was like, you know, a 28th of a chess set. And it was a mess. Like, but you can't, if they're like, make a boat out of duct tape, you can't show up without a boat made of duct tape.
Yeah, there's no escape from that. In law school, there are escapes. You know, you can't. In many cases, you can't possibly do all the reading that's assigned to you because it's not just the one class. There's 4 or 5 classes you're doing 100 pages of reading for, but you know, sometimes your professor will adopt a Socratic method. In my experience, that's fewer and farther between. And even if you do have a professor that does that, a lot of them are pretty understanding and sympathetic, and you can often just go to them beforehand and say, look, you know, Professor Smith, I wasn't able to get to the reading tonight. Can you please just call on me? And most of the time they're pretty cool about it. Every once in a while you get a jackass who wants to call you out in front of the entire class, but that doesn't happen very often.
I had to state a case after donating a pound of blood. I just want to say it was called Zarin versus the Commissioner, and I had donated blood like to be like charitable. I was like really dizzy, and the professor made me state a case because I was late to class for donating blood. But what you had said had made me think of something, and now I totally forgot what it is. But I remember what it is. I remember. So the other thing is that you're given a topic, like a broad topic that's like, so I want you to make a piece about gender or make a piece about tensility. And then you can choose from all the things in the world to make. In law school, it's very like, here's your case that you're going to read and you need to know the holding. Like, it's basically a rule. Like, and I think since the era of Donald Trump, we've gotten a lot more familiar with constitutional law, like the sort of common vernacular, but like there are rules. You learn those rules by reading the cases. And it's not like the rule can be anything within the scope of free speech. It's like a very narrow rule per case. And so in that way, it's not as much work. And also you get briefs handed down to you from older students, just so y'all know, you don't have to read that whole case.
But I think something you said earlier about tricks is really, really relevant because, you know, the first time you're doing a case briefing on your own, it's going to take a while. You're learning a new, for lack of a better word, you're learning a new language. It's very much learning a trade, learning a language, and you have to immerse yourself in it. But after a while, I mean, the difference between, you know, September of my 1L year and January of my 1L year is night and day. And you could see it in my performance and my actual like law school grades, because I knew what I was doing by that point, and I learned the tricks, so to speak. I learned how to do it quickly, and I learned what to look for in my reading. So instead of reading every word of 100 pages,
you knew exactly.
I knew where to go. I know what to look for,
Well, and you know how a Supreme Court case is written out as well. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing as, it's the same thing as an artist entering a museum. You're trying to look for a specific inspiration. Well, you know, the framework of like different movements, different styles of art or whatever. So you know where to go in that museum. And it's the same with the law. Once you sort of get familiar with the field and with that framework, you know where to go find what you're looking for.
Yeah. We just got another question popped in. The question is, what advice would you give to students who are interested in law but do not know if it is the right path for them? How can I get involved without going straight to law school? Well, I think my advice is don't go straight to law school. I think you probably need to do a little bit of research, talk to the people you know in your life who are attorneys and who've been through it, and go online and do research on what the financial cost of it is going to be. And I think you need to live in the world a little bit, get some experience under you. I think first of all, it's if you decide to apply to law school, that's the kind of thing that'll help build your resume and your case for yourself for going to law school, not just for them, but for you in your own mind. I think it's important to know what the world is like as a working person. I think that there was 7 years between graduating from RISD and enrolling at Northeastern, and in that time I had a whole career, and I don't know what if I would have chosen this path or if I would have enjoyed it if I had just gone straight from RISD into law school. I don't know that would have been a good choice for me. It might be a good choice for you. I don't know personally, but what do you think, Michelle?
But can you reread the question? Because I want to give as accurate an answer as I can.
The question was, what advice would you give to students who are interested in law but do not know if it is the right path for them? How can I get involved without going straight to law school?
Okay, so a couple things, because this is how could I get involved without going straight to law school? So I think that's a great question. There are a lot of different avenues. Unlike Greg, I actually just took off 2 years in between, and I worked one of them as a paralegal. So that's one way, is you can be a paralegal. But the other thing that you can do is volunteer in the fields of, like, I wish this was interactive so I could speak to this person and ask them more about, I would love to, Greg, maybe you can share my contact info with this person.
Sure, yeah.
Because I would love to sort of be able to point you in the right direction, because it really depends on what area of law you're interested in. But there are always working opportunities, whether it's at a law firm or in a public interest group, at a charity, at a nonprofit. For me, I realized that I wanted to have an impact and go home at the end of the day and say, today I did this, and this made this person's life different, or this made the world different. And I learned that through being in a nonprofit teaching kids SAT class, because that just let me know, okay, at the end of the day, I was able to help child X accomplish Y, and I feel better today. And that's filling a gap for me. But there are so many different ways to get involved. And you can get involved and be an artist. Again, like I was an artist at the same time that I was doing this. So you can continue with design or art and also make space. For example, get politically engaged. I took my law to politics. And that's a very interesting field of law, and it's really broad in terms of how you can contribute. But yeah, get involved in your community, and maybe we can follow up so I can point you in a specific direction.
Yeah, actually, before we end, I'm going to put our email addresses into the chat function. So if any of you want to reach out to me or Michelle, you'll be able to do that. I think that everything Michelle said is right on. I think the amount of work you have to do. The only thing I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. I don't think there's any way to sort of guess your way through this process. I think no matter what you do, you have to put in the work to figure it out for yourself. And that may not be something you can do right now. It may be something you have to do over a period of time. I know for me it was. Michelle, it took her much less time to go through that process. But the good news is, you're at RISD, and if there's one thing you know how to do, it's the work. And so do the work, whatever it is. And if you have specific questions about how to pursue those things, we'll be here for you if you want to talk to us about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the last thing I would say is, like, artists are smart in general. Yeah. Creative people are smart. You don't have to be smart to be a lawyer. Good lawyers are smart. So you've already got an edge in the sense that, like, you can't be simple and be a creator of things. Whereas, again, it's trade school. So the good ones are going to be complex thinkers. You're already there. So, that's why I say figure out if you want it and then go for it.
Here's a good question that I came up with.
That you came up with.
See, I'm a smart lawyer. What did you wish you'd known about law school before you got started?
I wish I knew how to format an exam answer. So I did not I had to teach myself how to do that, and I didn't know how to do that. I know it's a very boring answer to an interesting question. But I mean, law school just sort of was what it was, and I really enjoyed it. So I think I just wish that I had maybe prepared a little bit more, took some of the preparatory classes or things that were offered to get me accustomed to it. But, and I think that I wish I had known then. No, I mean, yeah, I think that that's really it. I don't have a good answer for that one. No, how about you?
Yeah, there's actually two things. The first is that, even though I came from RISD and had that ability, that background to do the work, and, also being a television producer is a lot of work. And so I was used to it. I don't think I was prepared for the sheer volume of reading and writing and analysis that had to be done. And once a mantra that I adopted early on in my 1L year is I don't have to win law school. I just have to survive it. And once I internalized that, it became a lot easier to prioritize the work I was doing, the reading. It was very easy. It was very common for me, especially in the beginning, to try to read one or two classes ahead, because the professor will give you the syllabus and they'll say, this is going to be, you're reading for the semester, and this is what we're going to talk about on these dates. And I'd say, okay, well, if, I'm on this week, but next week we're going to be talking about that. I try to read ahead and get ahead of it. But
I never read ahead. Yeah. Then you're not fresh for the class. By the way,
don't read ahead, because you're going to forget about it, because you're constantly trying to stay ahead, and you just forget about it. And by the way, most professors don't follow their own syllabus or agendas. And so they'll say, oh, we're going to be talking about the implied warranty of merchantability, and then they're still stuck on last week's topic. And so you don't get to it for another 2 weeks. All of a sudden you're 4 weeks behind. It's really easy to get lost and forget about what you read. And so I learned very quickly not to do that, and to, prioritize this. Well, this class is tomorrow, so I'm not going to read Friday's class assignment yet. I'm going to read tomorrow's class, be fresh for that, and then I'll read tomorrow. So things like that. The other thing is, you actually want to say something?
No. Go ahead. I'll say it after.
The other thing is, there's going to be a lot of, especially in your 2L and 3L year, there's going to be a lot of your friends and classmates who are doing things like, they're going to be like writing law review articles or working on the what do you call it? The law, the school's version of the law journal or law review. There's going to be a bunch of different events and things that you can be a part of, that a lot of lawyers do to build up their resume, and you can do them or not do them. I just don't think you should feel pressured to do those things just because everyone else is doing it. Especially in your 2L and 3L year, the workload decreases substantially, and you get to start picking your classes, and you're not doing just the sheer volume of work that you're doing your first year. And so a lot of students fill up that time with other things. But just remember to live your lives and have fun, and see your friends, and see your husbands and wives and your kids if you have them, and Like law school and being a lawyer does not have to be your whole life and your whole personality.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say it absolutely is not my whole life and my whole personality, but both of them make up a really important aspects of who I am. I do disagree with Greg a little bit. I'm sorry to say.
No, it's fine.
So what I would say, I mean, I completely agree, like enjoy it, make the best of it. But I would also say options are good and don't let fear keep you back. So I'm a kind of person where I was not afraid at all. And in fact, I'm contrarian. So I want to prove that I can do what I think I can't do or what somebody tells me is difficult. So, you know, so you get to have certain elective law classes, and I chose I chose federal income tax right away because I was told, ew, tax law is the worst. That's the last thing that you're going to want to do. It's so hard. Blech, the cases, yuck, the math. I wound up completely loving it. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I went into criminal law. That being said, I wound up being the basically the student head of Rutgers Law School's federal income tax clinic. And it was completely irrelevant to me as an assistant district attorney, which by the way, I hated and I left. Like I didn't like it. It wasn't right for me. And so I stopped. But I then eventually, when I opened my own law practice, I was able to take tax cases and estate planning, gave me a tremendous amount of flexibility. And same with things like law reviews or law reporters. Like, yes, people are going to be chomping at the bit to get on law review, because if you're on law review, then you're more likely to get at big law firm and blah, blah, blah. But the other thing that it does is it gives you areas of expertise and peripheral knowledge. And I think that that's important. I think another thing that law school doesn't teach that's extremely necessary for being a lawyer is written communication skills. Yeah. And so, I mean, you're writing your law school exams, but you're not, except for maybe a legal research and writing course, your writing is not being analyzed when you're in law school, except for whatever you spit out in your exam. So writing skills are going to be really important because that's what the judge is going to be looking at. That's what the partner is going to be looking at. That's what the person receiving the contract is going to be looking at. And you want that stuff to be tight. And it's helpful going forward. And it also, again, like the more knowledge, the better. Like now I advise on tax policy because I wound up taking tax policy for no apparent reason other than it was available and I was told it was hard. So, you know, that I would say, you know, if you have the bandwidth for it, I mean, if you feel like, oh my gosh, this is too much and I'm drowning, by all means, don't do it. But if you feel like you have the bandwidth, I say gobble up as much while you're there as you can, because it's all valuable information.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I don't think actually, Michelle, that advice is contrarian to what I was saying. I think they're complementary pieces of advice. I would also say one other thing that just occurred to me. There's going to be, especially as you get closer to graduation and start mentally preparing yourself for the bar exam. There's a lot of your friends and colleagues will say, well, you should take these classes because these are the topics that'll be covered on the bar exam. I'm actually ambivalent on whether you should do that or not. I don't think that's a good reason to do anything, by the way, just doing something to get through to the next thing. Because the reality is you're almost certainly going to take a bar prep course and they'll teach you everything you need to know to pass the bar. So if you really don't want to take, I don't know, like corporations or something, don't take it. They'll teach you enough of it to pass the bar exam. I mean, it can't hurt to have that knowledge under your belt, but the bar exam, like the LSAT, is a very specific test. It's tailored to a very specific type of a question and answer. And I knowing the ins and outs of corporation law isn't super important because the bar prep course will teach you how to answer that. Will teach you enough substantive law and then how to answer those questions the right way. So,
yeah, what was it? Negotiations. There was some sort of there was some section on the New York bar that was the thing with drafting checks and
Yeah. Oh my
Did
God.
that dumb thing. And they were like, it's not going to be on the bar. It's not going to be on the bar. And I was like, it was. So I read it like literally right before I left. And I was like verbatim, like whatever that trash was that they gave me in the Barbary course. But I agree with Greg. And I would say ultimately at the end of the day, the goal of law school is so that you can pass the bar and become a lawyer. Yep. And what you choose to do during that law school experience is sort of up to you and at your discretion. But again, you're sort of paying for a service. And that service is being taught the information that you need to pass your bar exam and become a practitioner of law.
That's as great a place to end it as any. Believe it or not, we're at 6 o'clock. We've been doing it for an hour. This is a great time to ask questions if you have them. I know a couple of you have already asked questions, but this is a great place to do it. In the meantime, I have put our email addresses into the chat. So if you want to write those down and communicate with us directly, Michelle and I would be more than happy to do that.
Of course, yeah.
So I'll just let it, just keep it open for another minute, see if any questions pop in. Michelle, I really appreciate this. I love being a lawyer. I just want to make it very clear. I loved law school. I loved being an attorney. I'm pretty agnostic on the law itself, the things that I practice, but I love working with clients. Even when I hate working with clients, I still really love it. So.
Yeah, I love working with people as well. And I think that that's something that you really get out of being an attorney. And it was one of the things, it was my law school essay or whatever on my application was actually about learning about people. And I think, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it as well. I wonder if it's because we didn't take it for granted, if having a different sort of background makes you appreciate it.
I haven't analyzed that too much. Maybe I should. It felt right to me, and in a way that, and I'm still an artist today, but art is more of a hobby now. It's not my career. My career is law. It felt like the right choice to make. And I very rarely in my life get to have epiphanies. And this was the closest thing I've ever had to an epiphany. So I didn't want to take it for granted. So like you said, didn't want to take it for granted.
Yeah. I should add, I think I touched on it earlier, but a lot of artwork that I made was very much inspired by my experiences as a lawyer. And it was very interdisciplinary. And interdisciplinary art is a huge field where there are people who are like Michael Jew, I believe he has a PhD in chemistry and he's a sculptor, so these are really interesting. And so one doesn't preclude the other, but similarly with Greg, I do make the majority of my living through the practice of law and policy. Whereas with art, it's very much a passion and something that when I have the bandwidth to make strong work, then I will make it and show it. If I don't have the bandwidth or if I don't sort of have the inspiration, I can't really produce the work. But that's because I do project-based sculpture versus, something else.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions popping in. So again, if you want to reach out to Michelle or myself, our emails are in the chat. I'm just going to end things. So Michelle, thanks a lot for joining up. If any of you are interested in the RISD Lawyers affinity group, please reach out to me and I can put you on the mailing list for our next meeting, and you can meet myself and others just like us. And otherwise, have a great night. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Greg. Good night, everybody.